the satisfaction of helping them secure a property when all they had was to trust the sales agent with the transaction. They didn't have anyone supporting them. So that was, pretty rewarding. Then that led to me starting my own business in 2020, which was probably a really good time to start. Our motto is buy without regrets. And so
if you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something.
Buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
You think about, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyer's agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrader, investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyer's agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. Super excited today to have Jess Ellam in the studio today. We've referred a number of clients to Jess over the years in the Adelaide market, which I don't think we've done an episode on yet. I might be wrong, but it's been a very hot market and there's a lot going on over there. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jess.
Thanks for having me.
Jess, obviously we know each other and referred clients to in the past, but a lot of other people wouldn't know a bit about you. You've been a buyer's agent for a long time now in a market where there hasn't been many buyer's agents. And maybe just give us a background of how you got into it and then how's it all going?
Yeah, so I started within the real estate industry about 20 years ago. So I got an opportunity to do a 2-week work experience at a local sales agent. The lady that was training me then saw some potential and offered me a full-time job. So I got to be a receptionist at 17 and I learnt, from the bottom. So I was assisting sales agents with the sales agency agreements, the contracts, the Form 1s. So I learnt all about them. And then that led me to purchase my first investment property. So my dad went halves with me in an investment property, which was obviously a great opportunity. Definitely want to do that for my kids. I eventually bought him out and that pretty much sparked the passion. So I then went to work with 2 leading local sales agents. So I got to do open inspections, manage the negotiation, speaking with vendors, updating them. So kind of learning and shadowing them, which was great. Then around 2010, just after my son was born, I worked for one of Adelaide's first buyer's agencies. So I got to learn the other side of the transaction. And that was really, at that point of time, unknown within the industry. Buyer's agents were still pretty new, so not many people knew about it. But I loved it. It was great. So I got to work alongside, that principle, learning the ropes, learning everything from the purchaser's perspective. So I got to sign up clients, work with clients, and then, the satisfaction of helping them secure a property when no one, all they had was to trust the sales agent with the transaction. They didn't have anyone supporting them. So that was, pretty rewarding. Then that led to me starting my own business in 2020, which was probably a really good time to start in Adelaide. So I'm just really grateful. It's just boomed from there. Majority of my clients come from referrals, so I don't advertise or anything like that. And I guess because I'm local, I'm on the ground, I've been in real estate for 20 years, know the sales agents, so have those good relationships. So it's just blossomed from there.
Yeah, I always like to ask that question because I do think it's always interesting, not just to show how long you've been doing it. 15 years in a market where there's not many buyer's agents, and seen it in different forms, pre-COVID Adelaide and post-COVID Adelaide, but also like really long term, 20 years ago. And also having that experience on the sales side, there's nothing like really understanding that world unless you're really within it, right? And so, and I think that really would help you today and help you, deliver outcomes for your clients. Let's just talk about the sort of Adelaide market then, not too much about what's happening and how hot it is and, et cetera, but just how it sort of evolved over that sort of time frame and, and then where it's sort of at now in terms of its sort of why people are sort of moving there or staying there and how it's shifting.
Well, Adelaide property market has always been just slow and steady. We're not volatile like the eastern states. It's just, but we've always caught up, comparatively with prices. And then I guess particularly through COVID when, international travel stopped, a lot of people were traveling to, interstate, and Adelaide was one of the places. And people were pretty amazed with how beautiful Adelaide is. The coastline, we're not just the city of churches. We've got beautiful beaches. We've got, the local cafes, pubs, festivals, those kinds of things. So particularly at that stage, there was a lot of people moving to, I was helping people move to Adelaide. So families moving here for jobs, just lifestyle changes. And then obviously investors, a lot of investor interest because, Adelaide was still relatively affordable compared to the eastern states. You could get really good yields. Vacancy rates were, under 1%, and you could get a property, under $1 million, 2 streets back from the coast, 20 to 30 Ks from the CBG. So it was just a no-brainer. But still, the Adelaide market is just always been slow and steady, and I still am seeing that we are getting really good growth the last couple of years, but I can just see that continuing into the future. I don't think we'll be that volatile market just because we've got, good population growth, good job opportunities, lots of infrastructure upgrades happening. So we've got the north to the south tunnel, so you can go all the way from the southern suburbs to the northern suburbs just on one main tunnel, which is amazing. So yeah, I guess there's lots happening to keep up with the growth of property.
Yeah, so you highlighted that interesting point. So the COVID, obviously, people travelled overseas or they went to the first locations to see friends or family, maybe stayed on the East Coast and always forgot about Adelaide, but then started travelling there, and then that, I guess, sparked them. Hang on a sec, this is a pretty good life. And so you saw a lot of interstate migration. But, Adelaide used to have a bit of a brain drain problem. A lot of people, would do their study there and then they would go and live, whether in, the East Coast or go overseas. And then, but a lot of them would come back, right? They would want to move back because of the lifestyle benefits of Adelaide. Have you sort of seen that just continue and less so people leaving now? They're sort of trying to make it work within, and stay in Adelaide?
Yeah, definitely. And there's even people, so expats that used to live here and now living overseas, obviously, or interstate buyers that want to purchase a property as an investment initially with the goal to move in about 5 years because of the lifestyle we have. And, we'll call the 20-minute city, we're probably the 30-minute city now, but, you can get anywhere in about 30 minutes. So the lifestyle. So yeah, a lot of people are purchasing just to get in the market as an investment and then with the goal to move into it, in about 5 years or whatever it might be.
The Adelaide market's obviously going through, as prices increase, people's budgets change, people's locations change, right places gentrify, etc. But when you think about sort of the longer term where people are from Adelaide, grew up in Adelaide, sort of what's the sort of stereotypical sort of what things that they sort of really prioritize in Adelaide and they value a lot versus, say someone new that, maybe doesn't understand that as much?
Yeah, I think it's convenience. So wanting to be a walking distance to local cafes, shops, walk to transport. So just ease of, lifestyle, especially the coast, close to the coast or close to the city is probably what people are looking for. Not so much your huge land. Again, it depends on, the demographic, if it's a family or if it's a couple or an older couple. But a lot of, the main focus is wanting convenience and that lifestyle. And certain suburbs and pockets in Adelaide offer that. And even, 20, 30 Ks from the CBG, you can still get that, convenience. So that's probably the main attribute people are looking for.
Obviously, so then if you think about that, it's like a stereotypical coastal or inner city location on a good street and, a quiet street. Do they put a lot of value around sort of the heritage or the style of the home and the quietness of streets? And, is there, a real value in sort of the aesthetics of the property and, certain sort of pockets more than others?
Yeah, definitely. And it all does depend on budget, of course, but most people do want a bit of character. Also Torrens titled. They're trying to stay away from, attached properties or, strata title properties. So Torrens titles is a big one. Bit of character, something unique, your typical layout though. So still your nice open plan living. And yeah, there's definitely more popular pockets, but it depends on, each client's budget. And that's, where they can afford to purchase. But yeah, character, at least 3 bedrooms, orientation's a big thing. So, north facing rear, north facing living, and yeah, the Torrens title as well.
Yeah. Okay. So the obviously there's a lot of a grid system over there in terms of the way that the sort of suburbs are sort of based. Do you see that there's a huge, disparity between what people are paying for that north rear, and they really do value it if they've sort of grown up in Adelaide?
Not really, but it's usually, not a must have, but a desirable to have the North Rear because it's more about, the street, the suburb, making sure it's not near too much housing trust, not near a main road, not over a flight path, nice, quiet street. The orientation is pretty important, in my opinion, for an investment, just because, that natural light, obviously. But yeah, there's definitely, school zones is a big winner, making sure it's in a quality public school zone. A lot of families obviously want that. And even for investors, that's what I look for because that obviously helps with growth. So yeah, there's a mix of attributes that people are looking for. Everyone, for home buyers, they've all got their own, individual brief. It's not just stock standard, but with investors, I definitely look for those attributes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the Adelaide market's obviously had a good run, and not to say that it won't continue, but obviously prices have gone up a lot, which, and also part of that, has been a lot of investors in the market. I mean, obviously you help them, but a lot of buyers agents, particularly interstate buyers agents who've never really worked on the ground or potentially don't have any team on the ground. Like, where are you seeing some sort of, danger sort of pockets, I guess, within the Adelaide market where, people are sort of forgetting about the sort of fundamentals or the consequences or the drawbacks of certain areas that the locals, really, devalue those type of pockets because they don't offer those lifestyle benefits of others? Is there certain areas that you sort of really try to avoid, or you see that there's, things that investors don't know what they don't know, and then they're bought in these areas?
Yeah, interstate buyers agents are, I assume, just fact-based. They're obviously not on the ground. They don't know the street. They don't know the suburb, the demographics. Maybe they do from the facts, the demographics, but it's all fact-based. So when I look for investors, because I know Adelaide very well and I've seen suburbs change and gentrify, I've got that local knowledge. So I typically try and stay a maximum 30 Ks from the CBD, and ideally as well close to the coast if they've got the budget for it. So yeah, interstate buyers agents, they just don't have, and the relationship with the agents, they don't have that relationship that, us locals do to try and, get the negotiation over the line, or, because they have that trust in us. But yeah, I assume it's all fact-based. They don't know, the local market here. They don't know what's popping up around the corner of the cafe, or, those kinds of things that you definitely need to look for when you're purchasing investment property.
Is there certain parts of Adelaide where, you got the stereotypical along the beaches in the city, but obviously you got Adelaide Hills, and, where are some of the sort of lifestyle pockets that, people who want, maybe have a bit more flexibility about not having to commute? Where are some of the pockets that you often help clients sort of explore that aren't in those other areas?
Obviously, it depends on budget again, but, for an investor, the average budget that I work with is, around that mil or just over. Home buyers, obviously, first home buyers around that mil as well. But the pockets are usually the southern suburbs. So the coastal southern suburbs are still relatively affordable. And within that 30 Ks from the CBD, you've got the train line, you've got McLaren Vale wineries, you've got holiday locations like Victor Harbour, and it's, an easy commute into the city. It's a 30-minute commute into the city. So that's definitely a good pocket. And then anywhere in the inner ring of Adelaide as well. For a mil, you're probably going to get a strata title property, but you're going to get something with a bit of character, close to those cafes. Port Adelaide's another good spot. So Port Adelaide and Adelaide has always struggled to, be popular, I guess, but I can just see it growing. It's a really beautiful part of Adelaide. You've got, your artwork on the buildings, you've got little wine bars popping up, really beautiful pubs, cafes, you've got dolphins in the water nearby, you've got, the train line straight into the city. So that's another really good pocket. You've got Semaphore Beach, which is just a 5-minute drive. So that's the western. So the western and the southern offer really good opportunities.
And when you think about sort of the Adelaide market shifting, you mentioned that sort of that north-south tunnel, which is there any other major sort of developments or things that are happening that you sort of have to factor in? I mean, a lot of cities like, for example, Sydney have huge issues with, potential changes to density and, rezoning. What are some of the things happening in the Adelaide market that you have to sort of factor in?
A couple of years ago, Adelaide did undergo a transition into what's called Planning SA. So now all councils in Adelaide are under the same essential zoning guidelines. So, we've got high density, we've got general neighbourhood, we've got, a couple of other zonings that now is across the board in all council areas. So that gives, homeowners confidence that, if they buy in a general neighbourhood zone, they know they're not going to be next to a block of units or something like that. So definitely need to look out for the zoning. And then, infrastructure wise, we've got, the new hospital that's just happened, obviously the tunnel I've just spoken about. We've got that good tech upgrades. We've got the submarine project, and then there's quite a few developments happening past Mount Barker and the north, so past Matapara. So, good opportunity for the population growth. But yeah, zoning is definitely, something to consider when you purchase a home and an investment property, just to make sure you're not going to be next to, a high-rise building or something like that.
What's your sort of thoughts? It's like always a belief potentially with Adelaide that it was, heavily linked to the mining resources sort of industry, and if that doesn't succeed, Adelaide won't. Like, how is that sort of Adelaide evolved way past that nowadays? And, is the, how does sort of, that affect things?
I can't see it affecting things at all. Adelaide, we're not just a little country town anymore. We've got lots of interest from, like I said, interstate and overseas. So that's why I think that property prices will continue to increase and not go down. They'll obviously eventually stabilize, but just because of all of the upgrades, all of the employment opportunities, there's new employment hubs popping up, good job, opportunities for interstate, people wanting to move here for jobs. And, I think we're the most livable city again this year in top 10 or top 5. So yeah, it's, I think it's just going to be the slow, steady increase with some, peaks in the market like we did last year. I think it was about a 10% increase. So I think it's just going to be, slow, steady increase in pricing, and then the population growth is going to help with that.
You mentioned around your agents, right? So you've been doing this for some time, and, it's really hard to sort of build these relationships. How are they sort of up with the buyer's agent sort of game and working with, say, yourself and the few that are been doing it for a while? Like, are they having issues with, the newer buyer's agents sort of from different states? And how do you sort of build trust to get access to properties and get the benefits of those relationships?
The way I approach agents and work with them is that we're, on the same team. So I definitely have a good experience with, most sales agents. And that's what it's about. I'm working for my buyer, they're working for their vendor. We understand that, but we both want, a positive result for our clients. And they really respect that. I do get a couple of comments here and there about, what's happening with these interstaters, but I just focus on, what I'm doing. And I'm pretty sure they have a good relationship with the other locals as well, because we are local, and we have been in the industry for years. And we do, we want to make the purchase process as smooth as possible. And I guess we eliminate a lot of the work for them as well, because we've obviously educated our buyer throughout the whole process. And then, once it's contracted through that process, I manage it all. So the agent just speaks with me, and it's quite seamless. So it's a really positive experience for sales agents here.
Let's say you are an interstate buyer and you've come to Adelaide, and I guess the ones that maybe you don't work with, or just you see other transactions, like what's some of the common things people haven't thought about, that they just didn't know what they didn't know. And, maybe they've paid for a property, or they've bought, a wrong asset, whether it's a rat run or something. Like, is there some common mistakes you see people who sort of enter the Adelaide market and they make in their first time they purchase?
I don't know if it's really mistakes. It's more just that they don't know how the process works, because the rules the guidelines are different in Adelaide. Like, the cooling off period is different. The sales process is different. The contracts are different. We have a Form 1 document. So it's more that they just are not knowledgeable on how the process works, and gets quite overwhelming. And that's what, I guess, when people come to me, that's probably the main issue, is that they don't know how to speak to the agent. They don't know the negotiation process. They miss out because properties here are selling sometimes within a week. But yeah, that's probably the main issue that they come across. It's just the whole process is quite overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think it can be quite costly, right? If you trying to figure it out and you lose out, or you get yourself stuck in a bit of a pickle in terms of you need to do something, you haven't done it, or etc. So yeah, absolutely. Obviously the contracts and obviously the relationships you need to move fast in the local market. You can't just sort of find them online easily. I mean, when you think about your role, particularly with home buyers, I mean, investors, you can sort of be a little bit more on the numbers, right? And sort of advise them and say, right, I think this is the right move for this price. And if we don't get that one, we can get another one. But when you're sort of working with sort of the home buyers, what are some of the intangible things that, at the end of the transaction, they're sort of like, oh, Jess was just, amazing. She stopped us buying the wrong product, or whatever it might be. Like, what are some of the things where, at the end of it, they didn't expect, but they're like, I'm so glad we worked with you.
I guess that the relationship I have with agents is the most beneficial, well, one of the most beneficial parts to the process. So an example is I helped a family move from Queensland a couple of months ago. An agent told me about a property that was coming on the market. It was going to get photographed. I can come through, have a look while the photographer's there. So I went, I met the owner because he was there, lovely guy. I spoke about my client and how, they're moving here. They want to, get into the area. They love the size of the property, all of those things. So I then gave my information to my buyer, and then I submitted an offer before the first open. The owner accepted it, and we got the property before it went to the market. So, that eliminated huge competition and obviously a stress-free result for my client. And then it's just knowing how to navigate the negotiation process. So depending on the sales agent, which process I'm going to tackle the negotiation. So whether we, do a building inspection first and waive cooling off rights just to make sure we're really prepared. So I guess most clients are just have that confidence afterwards and are just so appreciative of just being guided with any questions they have. Sometimes they think they're really silly questions, but they're not. And, just making sure that they're comfortable with the property, with the way it's moving, because it can happen really quickly. So I guess that, most clients are really just happy with how I've managed the process until we secure a property as well.
Yeah, just that stressful time and having to act fast. And when you have to act fast, you get even more stressed. And, that confidence to know that you're still doing all your DD, you're still valuing the property, you're still going through a process. But I think you're right. A lot of agents, people just naturally think all agents work the same, but they don't, right? They all have their own different way they prefer to deal with it and the way they shop offers and etc. And what they do in Sydney might be different in Melbourne to Adelaide to etc. And so, that local and having to work with the agents, I think super valuable. I mean, when clients come to you and they how do you sort of help them really figure out what's the best part of Adelaide for them to sort of match their life? Like, do you act like a quasi life coach, sort of like planning coach with them and sort of really help them figure out whereabouts in Adelaide? Because, there's always good investments at different pockets, right? And you can have same budget, could buy in different pockets, but how do you sort of help them figure that out?
Well, for investors, they typically just put their trust in me. So once I know their budget and, they might have a must-have such as, Torrance titled, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, those kinds of things. And then they're guided by me because they don't know the pockets. But for home buyers, definitely. So if it's, husband and wife, sometimes they have, different goals or ideas. So definitely a little bit of a, not counselor, but, the middleman trying to help them. And then, it's definitely, where are they working? Where do they have kids? So is it a school zone they need to be in? Do they like the coast? Is it, sporting that the kids might be into? Yeah, definitely need to ask those questions, and then I can advise where the best, pockets will be.
Obviously, the Adelaide market is, changing a lot over the years. And what's some of the things that, you find, and obviously you mentioned around density, et cetera. Like, is there any sort of pockets where you think that, and isn't sort of, it's changed a lot? Obviously there's some density issues happening in other states. Is there certain pockets where you're seeing a glut of new apartments or lots of townhouses happening and, just really it's changing and, you have to sort of really try to change. Obviously there's new housing estates, obviously to the north and the south, et cetera. But is there certain areas that you really try to encourage clients to sort of reconsider because it's changing so fast?
Not really, to be honest. Most of the high density are along main roads. So I would obviously stay away from a main road, and I assume a lot of maybe first home buyers and maybe investors with the lower budget are purchasing there. But we don't really have that issue. I mean, maybe, some pockets like Findon does have a few apartments, but stay away from kind of area because it's still really well located. It's right in between the sea and the city, 10-minute drive to the city, 10-minute drive to the beach. So I guess I'd probably more so stay away from the developments that are happening because of the oversupply potential and the amount of land that there is to develop. So in the north, there's huge amounts of land to develop and as well in the east. so past Mount Barker, but the south, there's not actually much to develop. So, that's a good pocket. But yeah, more so stay away from developments, not so much the issue with the high density, inner city suburbs.
So Jess, when you're sort of trying to come up with the sort of value of the property in a sort of fast moving market, I mean, I think that's obviously what Adelaide's experienced over the last couple of years, the last few years, right? And it's really hard for buyers. How do you sort of, not only just win the negotiation by paying the most, but making sure you protect them in terms of, making sure they pay a fair price in the market, even though it might be higher than they expect, but it's still a fair price?
Yeah, so it definitely comes down to the knowledge of the area, and then obviously comparable sales and comparing, apples with apples, so similar properties, because we have suburbs where there's good and bad streets, for example. So one side of the suburb I know is worth less than the other side of the suburb, where someone that doesn't know the area may not know that. So it definitely comes down to the local knowledge, comparable sales, looking at the public housing percentage, because again, certain suburbs and pockets have higher public housing percentage compared to, a few streets over, a few blocks over. So it's just making sure that, knowing the comparables and knowing, the pocket of where the house is situated, relatively priced compared to, what area it's in.
Yeah, and I guess encouraging them to maybe go a bit harder if it's in the better pocket and a little bit less if it's you're not, and maybe they pay over the odds and be a bit more patient on this sort of part of
And within reason, because it obviously depends if it's 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms 2 living, which is kind of comparable to a 4 bedroom. So it just it depends on the property, it depends on the land size, it depends on the layout, the street, all of those attributes.
Where's areas like, for example, the Adelaide Hills, like how do they sort of, is there sort of pockets that, quite seasonal, like it's, people want their second homes there or they don't want to live there? I'm not saying that's for the Adelaide Hills. Like, is there certain, while Adelaide might beat to its certain drum, there's sort of holiday pockets, or you've just got to be a bit careful where you buy in because it hasn't got a stronger sort of owner-occupier demand. It's maybe a little bit more second homes or holidays.
Yeah, there are definitely in the south and in the north, but so definitely staying. So that's why I stick to the 30Ks within the CBD, because it's higher owner occupiers compared to holiday. But these holiday places are more like 2 hours away from Adelaide. So definitely I don't purchase there for investors or home buyers. So it's mainly just in that 30K inner ring suburban area.
Well, Jess, we've worked with you on a number of times. Just recently, a few clients have worked with you as well. And, I do think the Adelaide market, like any market, you need really good professional advice. And I think if anyone's looking to buy in the Adelaide market, you're in safe hands with you. Super experienced, know the market, obviously, intrinsically. So thanks so much for coming on to chat today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance-related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.